Welcome to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. I am your host, EstelleBingham, and together we'll be delving into the profound meaning of love, the driving force of purpose, and the beauty of connection that shapes the fabric of our lives. In each episode, I sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals out there to understand the ways love has touched them. Jillian Turecki is a relationship coach, a podcaster, and now a writer. She's written a book, It All Begins With You, which is a consolidation of her 20 years of experience around helping people have better relationships. I'm so excited to invite you, Jillian Turecki, to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. What a joy, a fabulous sight to see you over there in New York. Are you in New York?
I'm a New Yorker who's in Miami right now.
Okay.
So right now I'm currently in Miami. So East Coast.
Okay. And we're here to discuss It Begins With You, which I really love and I loved and I'm in it and I'm reading it and it really speaks to me because it's all stuff, relationship, it's all stuff of the heart. It's also really your journey is so woven into this writing. And we're going to go straight in because the first chapter is so visceral. We're dropped in to the extreme experience of your trauma. So suddenly we're with you. You have been, you've been told that your mother has cancer, and you've been split. Your husband is splitting up with you on the phone, and you're also in the midst of having a miscarriage.
Correct. So my mother had been diagnosed several months prior, but she only had like a couple more months to live. And I had woken up to a miscarriage. And then my then husband decided he didn't want to come home and told me over a text. Yes. And that was June 2014.
What I love about the fact that you bring that to the book is how intimate that is. And, really that's what my work is all about, is our sort of journey into what it means to be intimate and just bringing people into your world immediately. I'm with you, I'm believing you, and I'm on that journey with you because you go straight into a dark night of the soul. And, these dark nights of the soul, as you speak about, they are how we emerge into the world. They break us apart and they feel so awful at the time, but then they kind of break us open and we emerge with more of who we are. How would you say that happened for you?
It was a day, it was a moment where I was acutely aware of the fact that my life was completely falling apart in that moment. Like life as I knew it was falling apart. And so I entered the dark night of the soul, which is part of the human experience, really. It is part of the journey of being a human being 100%. And it's what we do during that dark night of the soul that determines how we will emerge from it. And there is nothing that I could say to glamorize that part of my life, that experience. But I became very obsessed with two questions. One was, how am I going to get myself out of this catastrophe? And number two, what does it take to make a relationship work? And it was those two questions that I focused on for a very long time. And the second one, what makes a relationship work is something that I continue to obsess over 11 years later. I did that. I figured out how I was going to get myself out of it. And, having something to really focus on that helps you help others, in addition to leaning on friends and family and doing all the things that we have to do and, maybe seeing a therapist if that's the right thing for you. But ultimately, the real needle mover was finding something that inspired me to teach others. And that's what ultimately got me to the other side.
You speak a lot about that, the idea of, what this lifetime is about, and ultimately to reach a place of understanding that it's about being of service in some way, what that looks like for you. And it's going to look different for every single person that's listening to this podcast. You don't all have to, go into a kind of therapeutic, you don't have to be in a therapeutic setting, because we all have a different calling. And, but it does come, and there is some way of connecting, and being with our humanity, being in human experience, doing the human thing. It's like a gift, right? It's like from the pain, we're gifted with this understanding of more of who we are, but then also that is about being in connection.
Yes. When we're going through a hard time, understandably, we get very self-consumed and we fixate on the problem. And the solution is really to get out of that rumination as much as possible. And there are two things that get people out of that rumination the fastest. One is moving your body, exercise.
Yeah.
Two is helping someone, something, whatever it is, that is in need some way. The second one is overlooked, because exercise is really important, but ultimately it won't give you meaning in life, but helping others will. And this is proven. When we help others, that's how we transcend our own pain.
Absolutely. And you started with yoga, didn't you? You started in New York. With yoga, amazing yoga classes. I'm not sure where you were, but I'm imagining maybe somewhere in Brooklyn. I'm not sure where you were, but
oh yeah, it was in New York. It was in Manhattan and Brooklyn, actually. Both.
Yeah, I'm getting those vibes. I'm picking those vibes up. These amazing yoga classes, but you've said that obviously it wasn't a time of social media or, Instagram or Facebook. And this kind of mission dropped in for you where I want to get to the bottom of relationship and what makes a good relationship. And then I want to take that out into the world and help people with that.
Yes.
And so you kind of brought your medicine, you brought that to your community.
I did.
And that's where it started.
Yeah, that's exactly where it started. I already had a robust community after teaching at that point yoga for, I don't know, I don't even remember how long I had been teaching yoga. About 10 years at that point. Yeah, I started a newsletter a free newsletter where I would email everyone in my community. I started doing free talks. And then I started leading workshops, and it all began there. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And what it brought you to, the sort of distillation of the time that you'd spent, learning the coaching but sort of bringing that in with your own observations and understandings and wisdom, was that it all begins with us, right? It's actually this inner work is where it begins. It's where it it's where it begins. It's where it ends. Beginning, middle, and end. Right? It's here inside.
Yeah. So relationships, particularly romantic relationships, are a reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves. Now, the relationship we have with ourselves is multifaceted, and self-esteem is multifaceted. We could have really high self-esteem at work and really low self-esteem in a relationship. We could have really high self-esteem in our friendships and low self-esteem in our romantic relationships. We can have pretty healthy self-esteem in our romantic relationship, but low self-esteem when it comes to our work. So self-esteem is multifaceted, but your relationship reflects how you feel about yourself. And also it's not just separated from self-esteem. Relationships suffer when one or both people are in chronic stress and not doing anything about it. Right. So the state of your relationship is a reflection not only of how the two of you are relating, but how each person is relating to themselves. And the relationship with oneself is something that I've always been interested in. That began prior to yoga, but it really was reinforced by yoga, that we are trying to connect with the parts of us that feel more free inherently. And we're trying to remove the layers. In today's world, we would think of conditioning and childhood programming. But in yoga, we think about like removing or shedding through the layers of some scars or karma to find, who it is that we really are. And so anything that we want to change in our life, chances are, in order to create that change, we have to make a change within ourselves, whether that's a change to our thinking, which includes our beliefs, whether that's a change to our bodies, whether that's a change to a interpersonal relationship. There's always going to, if we want to grow, if we want to change, if we want to achieve certain things, it will almost always begin with a shift that we have to make internally.
Yeah, because we love the idea of the physical exercise or changing the nutrition, because obviously when there are breakups or there are, we've suffered in relationship, what happens post the relationship is we can really lose ourselves, and within relationships too.
Yes.
We can end up completely abandoning. So those physical or more kind of day-to-day things are really important, because they are sort of gestures of self-love which heighten our self-esteem. But these pivots, these deeper shifts, which means we won't repeat the pattern, that's when we've got to go, inside. We've got to show up to that inner work. And I really actually, I happened upon this piece in the book where you were talking about what it meant to be the difficult child. You were the difficult child. Your father, a very famous child psychiatrist, wrote a book. He was on Oprah twice, and he wrote a book called The Difficult Child, which he based on you. Yes. And I read that and I was like, wow, okay, here it is. And, you just really, that was one of your moments where you understood that this sort of label, what you had actually ingested as a child, this belief system, and the shame as well, right? I was reading this, I was like, wow, okay, because it's quite deep. It's quite deep because people would come up to you and say, "Oh, I know your dad, and you're the difficult child," right?
Yeah, so, oh my God, you're the difficult child. My daughter is a difficult child, or my son is a difficult child.
And in my work, I spend hours unraveling that, because I think what you mentioned in the book was the difficult child would grow out of being difficult, and so at a certain age, it's fine. They're going to calm down, and everything's going to go back to normal. But of course, in that time, you've lost parts of yourself. You've lost your wild edges. Parts of you are repressed. You're feeding the shame wound, right? Like every day you're like, I'm not enough, or I'm too much. Mm-hmm. And that's a massive part, isn't it? It's a massive part of how we heal on the inside. What was your journey to kind of forgiving Dad? And just, there is a chapter about that. You talk about the parents, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, if that wasn't my story, I definitely wouldn't have married my ex-husband. And then I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
So I understand the purpose of it, the meaning, the deeper meaning behind it all. And, this is why we have to be so careful when it comes to identity, because anything that we put after the words I am becomes our destiny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we're carrying around I am difficult and what that means, because it also to him meant other things, such as unique and different, and all these other things. So we're so programmed. Okay, so then I have to be unique, I have to be different, but then I'm difficult, and then I'm sensitive. And so I started to look at it differently. He wrote that book because at that time, he felt like that was a powerful breakthrough. That was his purpose. That's what gave his work meaning. His decision to use my name was a terrible decision and very dumb on his part, but I just don't take it personally anymore.
Right.
And I can't say that did it impact my life? Yes. Did it impact my life in negative ways? Yes. But look at how it's impacted my life in positive ways. So I think that the larger question that I had to grapple with is, what else did it give me? And is there a deeper meaning behind something? And can you create a deeper meaning behind it? I would never want to go back to 2014.
Right.
I would never want to relive that. But I also understand, had it not happened, I would not have found this purpose that I have in my life. And so again, I think it always boils down to deeper meaning, and then being able to see your parent as flawed and to have some empathy for them as an adult, because then we realize, when we reach adulthood, we realize how difficult life can be, and that our parents doing the best that they can, and we have to think about where how they were raised, and so that's part of the work that I help people sort of flesh out in their own lives, and so. I felt I had to do that first in my own life, and just to understand it more.
Absolutely. And it feels like, as you speak about it, it's a spiritual journey, isn't it? It's the understanding, it's that larger understanding of how we come into the lifetime, and we are, we do choose our parents and we choose these experiences. And there's a moment in time through the trauma and the traumas and how we've internalized different behaviors that, everyone is perfectly imperfect. We get to that point where we've alchemized, which is, what I speak about a lot, these kind of the stories. And then we get to a place of acceptance and forgiveness and grace, actually, where we can just, this compassion, what is grace? It's it's this overriding sense of love and acceptance and forgiveness, where we get to really see our parents too. So there's something very powerful in the seeing, isn't there? Where you see someone, a soul for who they are, or this human being just for who they are, allows you in yourself. You're giving yourself permission to be who you are too. They are the unloved daughters of unloved daughters, or the highly motivated sons of highly motivated sons that need really look, and we kind of get to allow all of that, a little bit of breathing space, not hold ourselves under the kind of microscope of something.
Or just hold ourselves into it being so angry and miserable. And because we can't go back in time and change anything. It is what it is. So we have to be able to look at things differently. And I think that that's part of maturing. I think that's part of becoming more mindful. We have to, because and I think that we need to exclude from this conversation very severe abuse, because that's much more complicated. But anything outside of that is, we as human beings, we get very fixated on a story, and that story is largely uninvestigated. Like when we talk about doing the inner work, working on oneself, in my view, is really, at the end of the day, investigating your stories, the stories that you have.
Absolutely.
You're just investigating them. You're bringing mindfulness to your belief structure and to the stories and the narratives and your values, to understand, or to explore if you can open up your mind and see things from a different perspective, which will then lead to your freedom, your more psychological freedom, which is what everybody wants. We want love and we want freedom. Those are the two things that every human being, that's what we're motivated by. So honestly, it's really just about bringing mindfulness to whatever story you have about yourself or about one of your or both of your parents or about your ex-partner, your ex-husband or ex-wife, and examining the story through a different lens, through a different perspective. And it has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with releasing old tension that you've been carrying in your body and in your mind for years, and for some people, decades, that you have decided you don't want to carry anymore because it's affecting your health, it's affecting your relationships, it's affecting everything. And so that, at the end of the day, is really what it's all about.
Well, actually, I've got two things I really want to talk to you about in this podcast before the end of this podcast.
Yes.
One of them is embodiment. So this idea of embodiment, you're talking about the body and what the body is storing. And the other is intuition. But, in my work, I see women and men that come all the time and they are not in their bodies. And so for me, energetically, I feel them above their bodies actually. And we have to kind of work at bringing them in. So it's yoga does the same thing, breath work does, and also mindful mentalization, like that sort of mind body, what that feels like, but and the heart, bringing that heart online for me is really important. But this lack of being in the body, this sort of disassociation, what are your thoughts on that in terms of where people are? What are your suggestions for people listening to kind of get back into their bodies?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things cause that, but ultimately, it's overthinking is the most common cause for that. Is living inside your head and being disconnected from your breath and your body and your awareness of your body. So people could be rushing all the time and never taking a minute. They could be going through some sort of traumatic event. But to anchor, the fastest way to anchor yourself in your body is through movement. So it could be any form of movement. Dance, I find dancing and breath work, which is not movement, but still powerful, and yoga to be the most powerful. But for some people, it's lifting weights. For some people, it's running. For some people, it's going for a swim. So physical movement is always the fastest, but also rest.
Yeah.
Rest. And it's planned rest. I'm taking 20 minutes to, sit down and turn off all electronic devices and just closing my eyes and just resting for 15, 20 minutes a day. So these are the things that we can do when we're alone. But there are other things, connecting with a friend or a family member. Like whenever we are, like, let's just say you've been really stressed and then you go out for a walk or a meal with a friend, you are actually co-regulating your nervous system with this person.
Yeah.
A hug, physical touch is very, very impactful for bringing ourselves back into our body. So that could be a hug with a loved one. That could be a massage. So physical touch, movement, breath work, rest, and connection. These are all things that bring us back into our body.
You mentioned, Jillian, about a relationship that you were in.
Yes.
In your early 20s or in your 20s. And
that abusive relationship.
The abusive relationship. And you were in an abusive relationship after a kind of quite a blissful relationship.
Yes.
I see this a lot. Like that it really presents a lot to me. Tell me a little bit about what came from that for you. This idea of the red flags, not listening to them, not listening to your intuition. What would you say to people, anyone listening who's in a relationship that they kind of have a sense that they shouldn't be in or they can't get out of? What would you say to the audience today?
I would say that your body always knows. And I've never to this day met a woman, for example, in a relationship with someone where there was any form of abuse where she did not know on a deep level that something was wrong, but she was ignoring it. And the ignoring can be for lots of different reasons. Naivete, like, oh, this feels wrong, but I believe the best in people and I see the best in this person. So it's okay. Or a naivete about human nature and how dark some people can be psychologically,
Yeah.
and not knowing that. There's the low self-worth where you would do anything just to be in a relationship. It's craving the connection so badly that losing that connection feels like like death. But the body always knows. You're not going to tap into your intuition when you're not in your body. But so there's two things. The red flags in a relationship, again, your body knows. You feel it, but you repress it and you justify it away. I've never met anyone, man or woman, who upon reflection has never said to me, you know what? I knew the moment something was wrong and I ignored it. Their body, their intuition, their gut instinct did not fail them. They just weren't listening to it. And then the second part of this conversation is if you want to regularly connect with your intuition, you have to get quiet every day because it's never going to happen in an overcharged nervous system. It's just not going to happen. So you have to get out of your way and do everything every day that kind of quiets you.
Absolutely.
There literally is no other way. And that's why a lot of people have intuitive hits very early in the morning before they're fully awake, when they're kind of like just kind of emerging from sleep, but they're still in bed for like, half an hour or so. That's a lot of times where people have strong intuition.
Well, the in-between times, like you say, it's the silence.
Yes.
There's nowhere else it can bubble up. So
Yes.
we have to create those moments of where we're allowing that alignment to happen.
Absolutely.
And it is a practice. And also noticing the difference between the intuition and our desire.
Fear.
Yeah. Like, our desire is to stay in a codependent relationship because it's all we know, right? So we're like,
Yes.
I'm really frightened of leaving this relationship. I don't want to leave this man. I don't want to leave this love or leave this woman because I don't want to leave this relationship that I'm familiar with, versus listening to the intuition that's saying, this is a no-go. It's that's a practice, and it also takes that courage and strength and allowing the voice to really speak to you more and more, knowing what it sounds like, really.
Yes.
Because it has its own sense of being. It is your higher self. But it comes
across, it's a feeling first.
Yeah.
It's a feeling, and it's a feeling in your body. And it's like a flash. And a lot of people feel it in their gut. That's hence why it's called, a gut feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this gut feeling and not listening to our intuition, and then the taking accountability part, which is so important too, isn't it? How you co-create your world. So if the intuition comes, the flash drops in, you get the download, and then you're just choosing to ignore the download for whatever reason, often, thinking about this really compassionately and lovingly, because we don't have the resources. We don't know how to get out of that relationship. That happens too. But there is this point, isn't there, where we think, well, everyone has their part in this. And what part, you've also co-created something. There's a moment where we are a victim, and then there's a moment where we have to move through that. So
yes,
if we're in an abusive relationship, you are a victim to that relationship, but we do also, there's that moment of accountability, radical showing up, presence, right?
Yes. That accountability looks like, I have to make sure that this never happens again, that I don't find myself in this kind of scenario again. So something has to change internally for that to happen. Whether it's just getting smarter about people, whether it's about understanding and being able to differentiate between the tolerable and the intolerable, which a lot of people struggle with. A lot of women struggle with understanding what is the difference between tolerable and intolerable, because there are a lot of women who are, want to see the best in someone and want to be
Right.
kind and want to be understanding and want to be supportive and nurturing. And so but they're unable to distinguish between what's okay and what's not okay. And so there's always going to be a time and a place where you're going to have to take some responsibility so that never happens again.
Hi, it's Estelle here, and I'm so excited to share my new book with you, Manifest Your True Essence, Clear Your Blocks, Find Your Joy, Live Your Truth. This is more than just a book. It's an invitation to come home to your heart. Within its pages, you'll find the guidance to reconnect with your true essence. Through gentle meditations, heart-centered practices, and soulful wisdom, you'll learn how to release old patterns, embrace your divine spark, and manifest a life filled with love, purpose, and connection. Remember, you are love, you are light, and you are infinitely powerful. What are your non-negotiables for relationship in the beginning? What if you were, giving some advice now to anyone who's listening, what are the non-negotiables that you think we should be looking out for in terms of, prospective partners?
Well, I think generally speaking, someone with whom you feel like yourself, like you can be yourself with this person. You feel very safe and comfortable around this person. And by the way, everything I say has to go both ways. They have to feel very safe and comfortable with you. So that has to be a non-negotiable. Agreeing on what a life well lived is non-negotiable, because someone might think, I want to just be a nomad.
Yeah.
And you could think, well, when I think of being a nomad, that's a nightmare for me. I want to nest. So that's not going to work. So and one person might want kids while the other person doesn't. So these sort of things are non-negotiable. Agreeing on what a life well lived is, and feeling very safe and comfortable in your skin around this person. That's just so incredibly important. Yeah, I want everyone to hold themselves and others to certain standards. You're going to be a communicator. You do not have to be perfect, but you're going to learn how to communicate with your partner. You're going to make that a priority. Have to make that a priority.
Yeah, because communication is the big, you must see that time and time again, Jillian, right?
Yeah, it's the most important thing. People don't know how to communicate. Non-negotiable. You have to feel safe and trust the person. It's just, at the end of the day, that's just, and trust really gets built when you build a strong foundation of connection and you can really be yourselves with one another. These are, generally speaking, the non-negotiables. There's just no, you're basically going to have a relationship that is fraught with suffering if those things are not in place.
Absolutely. And what would you say for all of the people who are dating online right now and experience the ghosting and experience all of these swiping, the sort of the death knell of the kind of constant swipe, swipe, swipe. It's like that doom swiping. What's your advice for being with that in a meaningful way?
You have to rise above it, right? So you can't be a slave to that way of being. You have to use the app, not let the app use you. And what I mean by that is, don't do endless texting with a stranger. Talk to people based on certain things that you like in their profile, but get on the phone quickly to see if there is some sort of vibe, energy between the two of you. And if there is, meet in a public place, but meet. And just figure out things more quickly. So that's incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
And have those conversations early on. The more that you can bring authenticity to these meetings, the better. And what I mean by that is that you're not trying to pretend to be anyone who you're not. You talk about, what it is that you're looking for. You have to be really direct and honest, and you have to be willing to have some very strong boundaries. If you want a long-term relationship, you better figure out what it is that's really most important to you, what your values are. You have to understand yourself. A lot of people are looking for the quote unquote right partner when they don't even know themselves. So how can you know who's actually right for you? And you have to give certain people a chance. Just give connections a chance. If you don't feel an immediate spark, but you like the person, give it 5 dates, see what happens. It's really about remembering your own humanity and other people's humanity. Yes, there's going to be a lot of people out there poisoning the dating pool with their unprocessed BS, with their immaturity, with whatever it is, with their toxicity. But when you know who you are and what it is that you want, and you're not entering the dating apps and the dating world with so much fear, these people aren't even, they're not even going to be around you.
I totally agree with that. Like, that's advice that I give. I'm all over that. Let's just not be manifesting. We don't have to do toxic pool. Like, stay in your lane, bring it in. Like, you do your work, be processed, and just emanate, just be in that space.
And be very patient.
And be patient. And also, I think what you said is so important too, that we don't allow the kind of toxicity of that environment to affect us personally. So this idea of, people swiping through us and we swipe through them, that we give people, like, we stay in our humanity with this.
Yes.
We really remember our hearts in this and give people a chance sometimes.
Yes. And don't do the endless texting over the app with someone. Really, truly do not do that. Your life is too busy. Just don't waste your time, because on the other side of that text could be someone who is literally terrible for you, and you want to find that out sooner rather than later.
That's the thing, right? I kind of say, take it to the bridge. Like, just take it there. Like, just bring it on.
Yes, I agree.
You've got a chapter in the book about, the honeymoon period, or just after the honeymoon, or not losing yourself after the honeymoon, not letting it go after the honeymoon period. Do we feel that happens? Do you feel that happens a lot?
Oh man, it happens all the time. We bring the ambassador of ourselves to the beginning of a relationship. We bring our representatives. We bring the best version of ourselves. And as soon as we get comfortable, we stop saying please. We stop saying thank you. We stop trying, and we take each other for granted. And the law of familiarity is the thing that couples are going to have to really combat. And it's very important, because the law of familiarity says, I'm familiar, so I'm just going to relax and not try. And that is like the kiss of death for a relationship.
There's a really subtle difference, isn't there? And I think people get confused with this, which is that I found my life partner or a soulmate, or this person who I'm so comfortable around, I can be my authentic self. And that's a good thing. But then we sort of lose some part of the subtle, there's a nuance around still valuing that person, still respecting that person, still remembering that person every day, and recognizing that every day we have to show up. Like, we're showing up to a practice. We show up to ourselves. You want to go to the gym, you want to eat well. But we have to also show up to that, to what the partnership is too, in some way.
Yes.
And not just kind of rely on the law of familiarity.
No, I mean, every relationship has like an emotional bank account, and you need to be depositing it into that account every day. And you do that with your rituals, how you greet each other after a long day. It's the conversations you have over the dinner table that define the quality of your relationship. It's those everyday moments, those little things. Please, like I said, please and thank you. These are the things that define a relationship. It's really rarely the big things. It's always the little things they're habitual, right? They happen. They're the patterns that the couple and the habits that the couple partake in every single day that defines the quality of their relationship.
And what about a relationship that's sort of like, 10 or 12 years down the line, and those moments, the bumps in the road where people find each other, they still we're finding out parts of each other till, forever, but
Yes.
that are sort of incompatible. What do you do with those pieces? So say there's a sort of, because you mentioned the 90%, 10%, I think was with your ex-husband,
Yes.
where 10% was incompatible, but 90% was compatible.
The 10% was not incompatible. It was a glaring red flag. So that's a little bit different.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we negotiate those, when we meet the parts of someone. So like you say, the ambassador arrives at the beginning of a relationship.
Yes.
And then 5 years down the line, 10 years, 8 years, 15 years, you kind of suddenly come across other parts of this person. You do love this person. So maybe it's not a red flag, but you do love this person, but suddenly you're coming up against the truth, right? That the perfectly imperfect soul in front of you. What would you suggest we do with those moments?
The best relationships are between people who allow the other person to grow into who they're meant to be, and to see them go through different. There's a wonderful quote. It's not mine. It's by the name of Heidi Prieb, which says, to love someone long-term is to attend 1,000 funerals of the person they used to be.
I love that
So
quote.
you have to be able to go through many relationships with the same person, and let them evolve and let yourself evolve. You don't have to be 100% compatible. If you are, you're friends, you're not lovers. You need to have the differences. The important thing is that you still have your core values that are in alignment. And there are scenarios where people do grow apart, where they enter a phase of their life and they realize 12 years later, 20 years later, that like they want different things out of life. They've both evolved and they've changed so much that they don't know how to be in a relationship as they don't know how to be in a relationship as the people who they have evolved into.
Right.
And that's part of life.
Or one person evolves and the other person.
Everyone is always evolving.
Yeah, but they kind of evolve,
maybe in different ways.
Yeah.
Or one person changes so much and the other person doesn't. Or doesn't change in the direction of the other person. So the mistake that I see people make is sometimes people get a little holier than thou and say, well, I've grown so much and my partner hasn't grown. And because my partner hasn't grown and they've stayed the same, I have to leave. Never tell yourself that story. It's better to not blame your partner and to say, I have changed so much. And what I've realized is that I want different things. That is a much better story and a much truer story than my partner isn't growing, so therefore I have to leave.
Well, we're taking accountability, right?
It's just full responsibility. I have changed. And therefore, I don't want to be with this person anymore because of the change that has happened inside of me, versus they're staying the same, they're not good enough, so I have to leave. The story we tell ourselves about our relationships really are so incredibly important. And we have to shift out of the blame and making the other person the problem. And it's not about making us the problem. It's just about, it's because a lot of people, when they tell themselves that story, what they're trying to do is not feel guilty for leaving their marriage or leaving the relationship. And so they create a whole story to make it so that the other person is deficient in some way so that we can justify leaving. And I just want to say, it's okay if you have changed so much, if you are not who you were when you fell in love with this person. And because of that, you don't love this person anymore. It is okay. But you have to take responsibility for that rather than telling everyone it's because they're just unwilling to change. Maybe their unwillingness to change is okay.
Yeah.
And your willingness to change in a certain and you outgrowing them is okay too. Let's just cut the bullshit story and tell the truth to ourselves.
It has to start there, doesn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
that's also you're just adulting, really.
Yes. It's mindfulness.
Yeah, you're adulting.
Yes.
So what about this phenomena that's happened with young people not having sex?
Oh boy, I don't know if I'm terribly honest with you. And it's something that I am in the midst with a few colleagues researching right now to really understand, because a lot of people are out there with their hypotheses, but I'm really trying to understand that a little bit more. And in order to understand that more, I am digging it much deeper into research. Do you have a hypothesis?
Yeah, I do.
What is
I
it?
feel like we're kind of, it's a sort of avalanche of disconnection, really. And I think it's a combination of
Well, technology is definitely part of it.
It's part of it,
Yes.
but then the pandemic, and then
Yes.
it's really traumatized. And then it's a sort of this the whole generation is really intimacy.
But is it more men not? Because it's much easier for women to have sex than for men.
Well, for men, it's porn, isn't it? For young minds,
Yes.
it's been this massive.
So that's where my research is.
Yeah,
taking
no, it's
me
huge.
With boys.
I mean,
yes.
the porn industry, what porn has done to young minds
Yes.
is decimated the intimacy. If we take our evolution from where it was really repressed, say 100 years ago, or where in Western society we were really sexually repressed. But obviously little things would titillate us. So we were not desensitized. If someone touched your hand, you'd be in you'd have a kind of a whole electrical experience response to that. So the desensitization, I really feel, is massive.
Yes.
And children and young children and growing, playing games on their own, but with their friends, but in other places.
Yes.
It's hardwired the brain along with the porn.
Yes. But we have to take it a step further into why so many men and young boys are turning to porn. And I think that where my research is taking me is sort of like a crisis in masculinity of
Massively.
knowing, and men not really feeling important anymore, or relevant, and not knowing their purpose. And so I think that that's also a big part of it.
Yeah, huge part of it. Where does that sacred masculinity, what does that look like? How that sort of virile, what does it mean to be virile? But also I think that underneath all of this is a kind of anxiety. There's always been an anxiety about performance between men and women. And, men have always had historically a huge stress really on them to be able to perform. It's all a sort of facade. And what porn has done is it's kind of taken a loop out. So you can kind of not have to get into the fear or the panic of what it means to perform. You can just...
I think when we're talking about sex, it's even more complicated than that, because I think for women, they also don't speak up. And so I think a lot of women are having a lot of bad sex because...
Big time.
A lot of bad sex because they're not actually saying what it is
massively
that they want. And then they're just settling for terrible sex. So I think this is a whole separate conversation.
It's a massive conversation, Jillian, that we could have for another hour.
Yes, exactly.
But I agree with that. I think women, have been having bad sex and have bad sex all of the time because, again, what does it mean to sort of know yourself intimately and be liberated and free, and
to speak up. A lot of women are not saying anything to their partner about what they want.
No.
And I think we should also say it's probably most of the women who are having bad sex are straight or heterosexual women.
Absolutely. I think that's good to point out because that feels more in where everything's at. Although who knows as well? I'd be really interested to hear how people feel about that.
Yeah.
But wonderful to chat to you.
Oh, so nice to chat with you too.
So wonderful. I'm so, thank you so much for being here. And before we go, I want to ask you the words love, purpose, connection, I always ask at the end of the podcast what they mean, what those 3 words mean to you, Jillian Turecki.
They kind of represent my values, honestly. Love and connection are very linked for me. Love is who we are. Love is, to me, the most important thing in life. Purpose is the thing that gets us up every day, that gives our lives meaning. And, when I think of connection, I think of community.
Yeah, and being human.
And being human, yeah, absolutely.
We love this moment in time, being human. It's so brief, isn't it?
It's certainly interesting, that's for sure.
It's definitely interesting. Jillian Turecki, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's such a joy.
Thank you so much for listening to Love, Purpose, Connection with me, Estelle Bingham. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd really appreciate that. And if you really liked it, then leave me a review so I can keep doing what I love, healing one heart at a time. You can also follow me, Estelle.Bingham, on Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest releases. If you feel in need of some extra guidance, then my book, Manifest Your True Essence, could be helpful. You can find it online or in any major bookshop. In the meantime, thanks again for listening, thanks again for watching, and I will join you on the next episode of the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast.